Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, subscribe to our channel. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. You ever hear a job offer and just know you're gonna regret taking it? That was me 2 months ago when I got hired to clean an abandoned mental asylum. Not demolish, not renovate, just clean. Night shift only, no other staff. The place hasn't housed patients in over 30 years, but apparently the state pays a private contractor to keep the interior in presentable condition. No one could explain what that meant, and I didn't ask. Because the money? It was stupid good. $42.50 an hour, full benefits after 90 days, all for 8-hour night shifts inside a building no one even visits anymore. It sounded too good to be true. Spoiler alert, it was. The place is called East Bridge Psychiatric Hospital, and it sits on the edge of a forested stretch of land upstate. They built it in 1911, shut it down in the late 80s after a fire in the East Wing. No one ever fixed the damage. That whole wing is still black with soot. When I showed up for my first night, there was already a man waiting in the parking lot. Slick back hair, pale blue eyes, neatly ironed janitor's uniform even though I'd been told I'd be working alone. He handed me a clipboard. No introduction, no welcome tour. Just a clipboard with 7 typed rules. He said, "If you want to last more than a week, read them carefully and obey them exactly." Then he turned, got into a red pickup, and drove off. That was it. I stood under the flickering parking light, reading those rules like my life depended on it. And maybe it does. The rules, posted verbatim. Begin your shift no earlier than 10:58 p.m. Clock in at the front desk. Do not arrive early, do not arrive late. The building dislikes inconsistency. Avoid the East Wing, hallway past room 113. It is structurally unsound and spiritually compromised. Do not respond to voices from this hallway. Clean the observation rooms first, always first. Leave the two-ways mirrors untouched. If the mirror fogs from the inside, knock once and walk away. If you find room 5B unlocked, do not enter. Lock the door immediately. If someone is sitting on the bed, offer your name and back away without turning around. Ignore all intercom announcements. The system was decommissioned in 1994. Between 2:17 and 2:23 a.m., you may hear distant screaming. This is normal. Do not investigate. Before clocking out, return to the staff lounge and erase your name from the chalkboard. Failure to do so may result in you being kept for another shift. I wish I could say I walked away then and there. I wish I could say I laughed, threw the clipboard in the trash, and went home to look for a normal job, like working drive-thru at 3 a.m. or mopping blood off gym floors. But I didn't. I walked through those double doors, clocked in at the empty reception desk, and I've shown up every night since. Because the worst part, I think those rules might be the only thing keeping me alive. Let me explain. That first night went about as you'd expect in an old asylum. Dust everywhere, long hallways, cracked tiles, a constant hum of old pipes and creaking wood that makes it sound like the whole building's breathing. I had a cart with basic cleaning supplies and a flashlight with dying batteries. I started in the observation rooms, like the rules said. There are 6 of them, lined up in a row across from patient rooms with those thick, foggy two-ways mirrors. As I walked past the 3rd mirror, it fogged, just like that, as if someone breathed on the inside. I froze. I swear I saw a shape on the other side, but it was too blurry to tell. I knocked once, like the rules said, and left. I didn't clean the room 5B that night. I didn't find it. Not until the 3rd night. But I did make one mistake. I stayed 2 minutes, past 2:23 a.m., just to mop the final stretch of the hallway. That was the first time I heard the footsteps, slow, padded, dragging footsteps, coming from the East Wing. The wing I'm not supposed to enter. And the worst part? I hadn't told anyone my name that entire night, except for the clipboard guy in the parking lot. So when I heard my own name whispered from the dark, Eli, Eli Parker, in a voice that wasn't human, but sounded just close enough. Yeah. I ran all the way back to the staff lounge, wiped my name off the chalkboard so hard I broke the chalk. Didn't even clock out, just left. I came back the next night. I had to. It's hard to explain why. Part of it was the money, sure, but another part of me needed to know what this place was, what it wanted. And the thing is, I think it remembers me now. Like the building is aware, watching, waiting for me to break another rule. I wish I could say the second night was easier, that I had a better handle on things. But the truth is, I showed up already shaking, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, staring at the front doors. It felt like something on the other side was staring back. The second I stepped into the building, I felt it. A drop in pressure, like the air itself had weight. The kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the silence is listening. Still, I clocked in at exactly 10:58 p.m. Not a second early, not a second late. I followed the same route, back to the observation rooms. I had to. Rule 3, clean 'em first, always first. I moved faster this time, kept my head down. The mirrors were dusty again. Even though I'd wiped them the night before, I tried not to look into them, but human curiosity's a curse. In mirror 4, I saw myself. At first. But then, I didn't. My reflection blinked a half-second too late. It smiled before I did. I dropped the rag, stumbled back. I blinked and it was gone. Just a foggy pane of glass again, with dust swirls and old fingerprints. I didn't knock this time, I just left. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe the rules aren't just things to do. Maybe breaking one is worse than doing nothing at all. I moved to the hallway by room 113. Past that, the hall goes black. The sooty, fire-burnt walls from the 1987 fire. The air changes there. It smells like ash and metal and wet stone. It feels angry. That night, something new happened. Something that wasn't in the rules. As I passed 1013, I heard a child giggle, high-pitched, delighted. Then, footsteps. Light, quick, like bare feet slapping cold tile. I froze. My flashlight flickered. I turned back toward the corridor leading into the east wing, the one I'm not supposed to go down, and saw something at the edge of the dark. And, just barely visible around the corner, pale, small, motionless. Then the voice again. This time, not a whisper. Play with me, Eli. No. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a kid. The voice was wrong. Layered. Like a broken cassette player. Almost childlike, but not quite. I turned and walked away. Fast. Doing Organus didn't run. I don't run inside the asylum. I feel like if you run, it gives it permission to chase. By 1:30 a.m., I was cleaning near the old therapy offices. That's when I found something else that wasn't supposed to be there. A red crayon lying in the center of the hallway. There were drawings on the walls. Stick figures. All of them with their heads X'd out. One figure in the corner had a name scrawled under it. Eli. I didn't draw that. No one should be here. The building is supposed to be locked tight. And yet there it was. My name in red wax under a headless stick figure. I cleaned it off with bleach, scrubbed the walls until my knuckles bled. I didn't want to leave a trace of myself behind. Then, at 2:17 a.m. on the dot, the screaming started. Just like the rules said, it wasn't close. It wasn't even loud. It came from deep below the floor, like it was being funneled through 100 feet of concrete and soil. It went on for 6 straight minutes. It never changed pitch. Never paused for breath. Just a constant scream that sounded like one person until you listened close and realized it wasn't one. It was dozens. Some begging, some laughing, some howling like dogs. Rule 6, do not investigate. I sat in the mop closet and waited it out, hands pressed over my ears, counting the seconds. At exactly 2:23 a.m., it stopped, like someone flipped a switch. And then, silence. I returned to the lounge just before 5:55 a.m. like I always do, to wipe my name off the chalkboard. But tonight, something changed. My name wasn't written in chalk anymore. It was carved into the board. Deep grooves, scraped and jagged, all-caps letters. Eli Parker, dug in like it was meant to stay. I tried wiping it, nothing. Grabbed a razor blade from the supply drawer and tried scraping it off, but it just kept going deeper, like the wood was absorbing my touch. That's when I noticed something worse. Beneath my name, someone had carved another, a name I hadn't seen on the board before. A. Radley, 1987. There was no Radley on the staff list. But 1987? That was the year of the fire. I don't know what this place wants with me, but I think it's decided I'm staying longer than I planned. I didn't go back to the lounge after seeing the name carved into the chalkboard. I couldn't. I grabbed my supplies, mop, rags, gloves, and bolted out of the room like I was running away from something I couldn't quite see, but the feeling was there, the feeling of being watched, the air growing thicker with every step. It wasn't just the rules now, it was the feeling, something in the walls, something alive. Next day, I told myself I'd finish what I needed to. It would be the same routine. I'd stick to the schedule, ignore the oddities, get the hell out of here and never come back. But the thing about these places, they don't let you leave. Not easily. I went to room 213, another therapy room, half lit by the flickering overhead light. There was a chair by the window, the one I'm not supposed to touch because it's off limits. I always try to avoid the chairs. Something about the way they creak when you sit in them. This time I couldn't resist. I pulled the chair out and sat down, trying to catch my breath, my hand shaking as I wiped the back of my neck. Then the door slammed. The room was empty when I walked in. I checked every corner before sitting down, but when I stood up, the door was shut. Locked. I should have gone for the keys right then, should have tried to leave, but I didn't. I stood still. I felt something pressing in, like an invisible hand was wrapping itself around my chest, pushing my heart faster than it should go. And then, a sound, a soft shuffle from the corner of the room. I froze. I couldn't move. My body was too heavy, like something had sucked the air right out of me. I looked toward the corner, but the shadows there were too thick, too alive. Then, it moved. Not a person, not a shape, just a shift, like something that was once there, isn't anymore. The shuffle got closer. I couldn't breathe. There was someone behind me. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I could hear it. The breathing. Slow. Wet. Like someone drowning under a heavy, wet cloth. What did this mean? I couldn't look. I just couldn't. Then came the words. Soft, raspy. Don't leave. It was so close now. I could feel the cold seeping through the fabric of my uniform. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything stopped. Not sure how long I stood there, the room suffocating me with silence. I was sure I had heard the breathing, the words, so why was everything so still? I reached for the door, my fingers numb, but then something caught my eye. A piece of paper on the floor. I bent down to pick it up, hand shaking. It was crumpled, torn at the edges. On the paper was a name. Amelia Radley, and a number. 1987. The same name as before. I ripped the paper in half, stuffing it in my pocket. I wasn't staying another second in that room. I ran down the hall, toward the exit, or where the exit was supposed to be. But when I got there, I saw something I wasn't ready for. The main doors were gone. The glass panes were shattered, and in their place, there was only a brick wall. I stumbled back, almost falling. How long had it been since I walked past those doors? I couldn't tell. My head was spinning, dizzy with the strange pressure of the building. It was as if I'd stepped into another world. The clock on the wall said 3:12 a.m., but the walls seemed to stretch far beyond what they should have been. The building felt larger somehow, more oppressive. I had to get out. I had to. I checked the back entrance. It was blocked off too, with a stack of old metal chairs piled up in front, and behind it, I swear I saw a shadow, dark, long, and swaying like someone was walking just behind the pile. But there was no one there. I had no choice but to return to the hallway. My footsteps echoed, and I thought I heard something. A voice, faint and distant, like it was coming from underneath the floorboards. "Eli!" I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart slammed into my chest. My legs wouldn't move. That voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a breath. It was just there. The walls started creaking. Not in the usual way, not from age or rot. This was different. This was as if the building was waking up. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know if it mattered anymore. Then, the overhead lights buzzed, flickering and sputtering until they died. Darkness. Total, suffocating darkness. I pulled the flashlight from my pocket and switched it on, but it barely cut through the blackness, just enough to show the hallway stretching ahead of me. A stretch of blackened doors and empty rooms. And in one of those doors, I swear I saw something move. A figure, faint, shimmering, like it was just outside the light. I was standing in the doorway, staring at me, and then it whispered again. "Don't leave, Eli." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I didn't. I stepped forward, slowly. I wasn't supposed to. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't stop myself. The shadow moved again. A hand, reaching, and then it was gone. I wasn't alone anymore. And now I don't think I'll ever be able to leave. The air felt colder now. I stood in the hallway, the beam from my flashlight flickering, as if it were warning me. The whole place seemed like it was waiting, like the building itself had been holding its breath, preparing for something to happen. The shadows clung to every corner, stretching out like fingers, reaching toward me. And that feeling, that gnawing sensation of eyes on the back of my neck, it didn't let up. I didn't know how long I'd been standing there, staring into the empty doorway where the shadow had been. But the hallway stretched ahead, the sound of my breath heavy in the silence, and the darkness felt like it was swallowing me whole. I should have gone back. I should have followed the rules, gone to room 307 and cleaned it like I was supposed to. I should have stayed on schedule. But something about that shadow and that voice made my feet move toward it, despite every instinct telling me not to. I walked down the hallway, each step taking me closer to the door that had never been there before. The room 218, stood silent at the end of the corridor, the door hidden behind layers of blackened mildew and peeling paint. It hadn't been there when I first started my shift. I'd been through this hall so many times before, yet now, suddenly, this room was here. I reached out to touch the handle. It felt cold under my fingers, colder than it should have been. I don't know why I didn't turn back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Either way, my hand twisted the knob and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was dark. The only light came from the dim beam of my flashlight, slicing through the dust and the stale air. It was an old therapy room just like the others, but this one felt different. This one felt wrong. I stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind me with a force that made me jump. I whipped around, but the door was gone. Just gone. The room was now sealed, the walls pressing in on me, the air suffocating. The windows were covered by thick, grime-coated blinds that wouldn't budge. My pulse quickened. I couldn't breathe. The feeling of being trapped clawed at my throat. But something in the back of my mind told me to look, to search. I swept the flashlight across the room, my hands trembling. The light caught on something in the far corner, hidden behind a rotting old cabinet. A chair. A large, plush chair. The kind they used for electroshock therapy. I didn't need to read the label to know what it was. I had seen enough photos to recognize it. The chair was spotless, clean, too clean, as if it had been used just recently. I approached it slowly, each step sending a jolt of panic through my body. And then I saw it. There, etched into the leather. Not a name, but something far more disturbing. Well, it's not over. The words were carved deeply, the letters jagged and uneven. I traced the letters with my fingers, the air growing colder, my breath turning to vapor. Suddenly, a sound, a soft shuffle, like someone moving in the darkness. I spun around, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the room again, but there was no one there. I was alone. I stepped back, my hand clutching the edge of the cabinet for support, when I saw something that made my heart freeze. A figure standing just inside the doorway. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was just a shape, a black silhouette against the dim light. It was tall, too tall, its limbs elongated in unnatural ways. It didn't move. It just stood there. And then the voice came again, raspy and low. "Don't leave, Eli." I didn't move. I couldn't. My body was frozen, caught between fight and flight, but all I could do was stare at it. The thing. I don't know how long I stood there, but the longer I looked, the more real it became. It started to gain features. A face, the faint outline of what looked like eyes, hollow eyes, empty. My breath caught in my throat. I heard a clicking sound, like nails on glass. The figure's fingers twitched, tapping lightly on the wall. Tap, 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 closer. It started moving toward me, slow but deliberate. A shift in the air, a pull. I turned toward the chair, desperate to find a way out. I knew there was no way out, not anymore. The chair, the words carved into it. That's when it clicked. I had to sit in the chair. I had to finish this, finish what had been started. But I didn't want to. I knew I shouldn't. Everything in my body screamed for me to run, to break down the door, to get the hell out of there. But the figure behind me, the way it was growing closer, the way it was pulling me in. I didn't have a choice anymore. I had to set. I turned toward the chair, my legs like jelly. The cold air pressed down on me. It felt like I was walking through water, like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. "Dad," I sat down in the chair. The room shifted. The walls seemed to close in, bending around me like they were warping, twisting in some unfathomable way. The figure was standing right beside me now, and I could feel it. Its presence, its breath, cold against my cheek. And then, nothing. The air stilled. The figure was gone. The door was back. The room was just a room again. But I knew something had changed. I hadn't left. Not really. Not for good. I looked at the clock. It was still 3:12. But I was different. Something inside me had shifted too. Something I couldn't explain. When I left the room, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I was supposed to follow the rules anymore, if they mattered. But there was one thing I was certain of. I couldn't stay here. Not unless I wanted to become part of the asylum, part of whatever still lingered here. I didn't turn back, but I felt the eyes on me. I always would. The hallway stretched before me, long and empty, yet it felt like something was waiting at the end. The air was thick, like the asylum itself was breathing, keeping time with the rhythm of my heartbeat. I felt it again, the presence that had been following me since I sat in that chair. It was like a shadow that clung to me, that mirrored my every movement. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real. It was just stress, just the strain of working in a place like this at night. The oppressive silence, the weight of history hanging over every room. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that something had noticed me. I reached the end of the hallway and looked up at the entrance to room 307. It had been on the list for hours, and I had put it off as long as I could, but now there was no choice. I had to clean it. I had to follow the rules, or I wouldn't get paid. I wouldn't be able to leave. The door was ajar, just slightly. A sliver of darkness beckoned me. I didn't want to go inside. Not again. I had been avoiding this room for a reason, but it was the last one on my list, and the place was already weighing on me. The only way out was to finish the job. I pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking in protest. Room 37 was exactly what I expected. Cold, barren, with nothing but a few old hospital beds and a faint, musty smell in the air. It looked like the kind of room where the walls would whisper if you stayed long enough. And that's when I saw it. The mirror. It wasn't supposed to be there. I knew that for a fact. I had walked through this room countless times, and there had never been one. The mirror was large, positioned against the far wall, framed in dark wood that was chipped and warped with age. The surface was cracked, but still, I could see my reflection, staring back at me. At least, I thought it was me. I stepped closer, the hairs on the back of my neck rising. My reflection was distorted. The usual tired, worn face I was used to looking at was off. The room's eerie shadows playing games with my perception. I took a step back, but then I saw it. In the reflection, I was still standing by the mirror, but in the corner of the glass, someone else was there. Someone who wasn't me. A figure. It was blurry at first, like a shadow that hadn't fully formed, but then it came into focus. A woman, dressed in what looked like a hospital gown. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty, her mouth slightly open as if she were trying to speak, but no sound came out. My breath caught in my throat, and I took another step back. The figure didn't move, but I could feel her eyes locked on mine through the glass. I turned away quickly, my heart racing, the oppressive weight of the room pushing in on me. My hands trembled as I tried to steady the flashlight, but it flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get out, but the door wouldn't open. I tried the handle. Nothing. The door was stuck. The entire room was locked in place, frozen in time. And then I heard her voice. "Don't leave, Eli." I whipped around. The figure was there, right behind me, standing in the reflection. But she wasn't in the room with me. She was in the mirror. Her eyes were wide and empty, her mouth now moving, the words coming out with a rasping, whispering sound that seemed to press against my mind. I tried to breathe, to make sense of it. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be real. But then the reflection shifted. The woman's face wasn't just empty anymore. There was something in her eyes, something that wasn't human. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide, far beyond what was possible. She smiled at me, a grin that spread too far, revealing teeth that were sharp, jagged, unnatural. The room was getting colder, the air growing thick, choking, suffocating. I could feel her presence now, not just in the reflection, but in the room too. I could feel her behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned around quickly, expecting to see her standing there, but there was nothing. Nothing except the cold, empty room. But when I looked back at the mirror, her face was still there, still grinning at me. "Don't leave," she whispered again, her voice full of malice. "You're mine now." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Every part of me was frozen in place, locked in that moment. The reflection was not mine anymore. The woman in the mirror was me. Her eyes were mine. Her mouth, twisted into that cruel grin, was mine. But it wasn't me. Not really. The air pressure dropped suddenly, and the mirror began to vibrate. The reflection distorted, warping like it was being pulled out of shape. The woman moved. Her hand reached out through the glass. I screamed, but the sound was muffled as if something was blocking me from making a sound. I tried to run, but the room was shrinking, closing in around me, the walls tightening. And then darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in room 307 anymore. I wasn't in the asylum either. At least, not the way I remembered it. I was standing in a hallway. It looked like the asylum, but it was different. Wrong. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper. The once white paint chipped and faded into a dull, sickly yellow. The lights above flickered, casting long, erratic shadows. I heard a faint humming sound in the distance, like an electrical current running through the walls. I reached out, instinctively trying to steady myself, but my hand brushed against something wet. I pulled it back quickly, and when I looked down, I saw that my palm was stained, covered in blood. Intros. It wasn't mine. I hadn't been cut, hadn't felt any pain, but the blood was real, slick and dark, as though I'd been holding something, or someone. I wiped my hand on my pants, heart pounding. I glanced around, searching for the source of the blood, but there was nothing. No body, no signs of struggle, just the hallway, stretching into darkness. I could feel the weight of my own breath, fast, shallow. The walls seemed to close in on me as I tried to make sense of where I was. I tried to remember how I'd gotten here, but all I could recall was the mirror, the woman in the reflection, her grin. I looked down at my hands again, trembling, the blood still fresh on my skin, and then, from somewhere far off, I heard a voice. Eli! It was quiet at first, a whisper, so faint I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it, but then louder, closer. Eli! It wasn't my name, not the way I'd ever heard it. It wasn't my voice either. This voice was deeper, darker, familiar, but not in any way I wanted to recognize. I turned around, but the hallway stretched endlessly. There was no one there, no source for the voice. I didn't know what was happening. My head was spinning. I tried to run. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away from that voice. But every step I took, the hallway twisted, contorted. The floor creaked and groaned underfoot as though it was alive. The lights above flickered more rapidly, and then, crack. One of them exploded. A burst of sparks flew through the air, leaving only the dim, sickly glow of the remaining bulbs. I stopped. My mind raced, my thoughts jumbled together like broken glass. What was happening to me? Where was I? Why couldn't I wake up? The voice spoke again, louder now and closer. You didn't follow the rules. I spun around. The voice was in the hallway with me, but I couldn't see anyone. There was no one there, only darkness at the far end of the corridor. And then I saw it. At the very end of the hall, just past the final door, was a figure. The same figure. The woman from the mirror. Her face was gaunt, pale as bone. Her hair hung limp around her shoulders, and her eyes, those wide, empty eyes, stared at me. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but the air had thickened around me, suffocating every word before it left my mouth. My throat was dry, the blood still clinging to my hands. I wiped them against my pants again, but the stain wouldn't go away. She took a step toward me, and then another. And with each step, the lights above me dimmed until the entire hallway was plunged into darkness. I felt it again. That cold, that weight. Her presence was all around me now, pressing in on my skin, making it feel like it was crawling with something unseen. Like there were more of her, more things hiding in the shadows, just waiting to reach out. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick with dread. It wasn't just fear. It was the sensation that something was about to happen. Something that would tear everything I knew apart. I took a step back, and the ground beneath me shifted. The hallway, no, the entire building began to move. It was as if the walls were alive, breathing, bending and groaning as though it was trying to swallow me. Then, I heard it again. "You didn't follow the rules." The voice was now right next to me, a whisper, but not from the woman in front of me, from inside my mind. I tried to turn away, but the hallway stretched longer, the walls closed in tighter. I was being pulled in every direction. The light flickered once more before completely going out. And that's when I saw it. A door. It wasn't there before, but now there it was, standing in the middle of the hallway, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. It was familiar. I had seen it before, but I couldn't place it. My body moved toward it as if I had no choice, as if it wanted me to open it. It wasn't until I was standing directly in front of it that I realized there were no handles, no way to open it. I pushed against it, my hands trembling, desperate to get out. But it didn't give. The door was solid, unyielding. And that's when I heard her. "The door isn't for you, Eli." The woman's face appeared in the crack, her grin stretched impossibly wide, her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt them, in my soul, as if she could reach inside me. "It was never meant to open for you." I stepped back in horror, but my feet stumbled. The hallway was warping again, shifting and twisting like it was alive. The door, the thing that had been drawing me in, was no longer in front of me. I was lost. And the asylum? It was alive.